Hi, hello, me again. Alright, so I have a different mic. Tell me if you guys think this is better, but I'm not sure. It's because the other one kept making this weird buzzy sound, but this one also is starting off like it keeps going green and red in my sound gauge thing. But anyways, on to the topic. My last video was regarding a case that occurred in Amstetten, a small town in Austria, by a girl named Elizabeth Fritzl, and her father, I don't even like to refer to him as that because he does not act like one, who abducted her and kept her in a basement for 24 years. And I wanted to continue on this case and hopefully be more efficient with it because I rewatched the other one and it was way too rambly. So I made some case notes. And to move on from that, as I mentioned before, he kept her down there. And just to recap for anyone that hasn't seen it, he sexually assaulted her. I'm not sure if it began initially, right away, or if it occurred after a little bit, but either way, she had no one with her for 5 years. It was just him coming down, what I've researched says, about every day to maybe at least 3 times a week, most likely more, at least from what I've been able to gauge. And so obviously it was a very horrible situation, and she got pregnant at the age of 23, I believe. Let me see. Yeah, at the age of 23, he was pregnant. She was pregnant, and that's when he left her alone with very basic supplies and a book on how to do childbirth, how to have a child. And I think that is disgusting because of so many reasons. But to move on, about a year later or so, she ended up having another child, and then 3 more. The total ended up being 7, although she did have another child, but that went badly, and she ended up losing the baby. This is where we go into his sick, twisted mind, because when she lost the baby, he watched this child of his die, and then considered it to be a problem, and then needed to dispose of the baby, which would later come into account of the fact that it assisted in getting him convicted for the fact that he did such a horrible act, because there was remnants or evidence of what had happened. And while she was down there, she honestly did her best to be a good mother, and I find that amazing that she still continuously tried her best. And that strength of will and character really shows in her actions. She tried to teach the children. She tried to just make things as normal as it can be for someone in that situation, because obviously she loved her children, albeit with horrible reasons, or not reasons, but horrible methods of them coming into the world from a horrible man. But these were her children. She loved them and wanted to protect them. All they had down there was this small TV, I believe, and that was the only thing for entertainment. Now, eventually things got to be too crowded because 7 children. And so 2 things happened. One is that he made Elizabeth and her children basically kind of assist but do a lot of the work to be able to expand the basement. Now, this basement, as I previously mentioned in the other video, was built to the extent of being capable to, wow, that was a lot of words, essentially would be an atomic bomb shelter. And that wasn't strange because it was the end of Cold War, and this time they were expanding it. And it was a very complex layout in terms of just being a basement, and it took him 6 years to build this, so obviously there was a lot of thought put into the process. He planned this 6 years in advance at least. So they tried to expand it, and they worked towards that and building other areas to expand it to fit all the people. But Josef, I believe that's how they're pronouncing his name. So Josef Fritzl, the father, still thought that really there wasn't enough room, and so he decided that the best way to do this was one of the oddest solutions I've ever found. At least he didn't murder them, but he decided to place them outside, like the doorstep, or just leave them with a note that he would make Elizabeth Fritzl, the daughter, write. And it would say that this is her child, but she wasn't capable of taking care of it. So she left it with people that she would trust, blah, 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 blah. Basically, she wanted them to take care of him. So 3 of the children ended up getting to live upstairs, which in a way gave them a relatively normal, as much as it can be, life. And I guess that's good. I mean, I hope he wasn't as horrid to them, but I don't know much about what their life was like, unfortunately, but I know at the very least that they weren't trapped in a basement. And the way he chose this was sort of like the loudest, or I forget if it was quiet, but I know for sure loudest he would choose based on age and if they were going to be like something that would cause someone to notice something. And he would usually choose, or actually always chose, the children that were infants or at least below the age of being able to speak, so they couldn't tell anyone what happened because they're babies. And so that was, he, as I said, ended up trying to dispose of the baby, the first baby. Wow, I just jumped back. Let me go back to where we were with the 3 children upstairs. And so with those letters, they weren't suspicious yet, because they still thought that Elizabeth was a runaway who had gone to a cult to live there. Although a lot of testimonies from friends were like, this isn't how she is, this isn't the way she usually lives her life, out of character. But the investigation was closed after a year from her initial disappearance, and then reopened, looked into the family, looked picture perfect, until they found bad things about Joseph. More to go into that is, I believe I mentioned it before, but just to recap, he was essentially pretty abusive in the house to both Rosemary, I think is how they say it there, Fritzl, his wife, and his children, and particularly fixated on Elizabeth, which is something I wonder about. She was the 4th child, so a middle child, of, I believe, 7 other children that Rosemary and Joseph had. And I just wonder what made him fixate on Elizabeth. Hopefully I'm pronouncing things decently. Also, I know there's a glare. Hopefully it's not too bad. I usually use this to cover dark circles. Oh well, whatever. Let's get rid of the glare. Put some hair in my face to get rid of stuff. Wow, I look pale and like I have no eyebrows. But anyways, to continue. That whole initial idea, I think, okay, ADHD meds were off. Hopefully I'm still on track. The whole idea seemed fishy to other people. Reinvestigated, looked like it was bad, but they had nothing really to pin on him at this point, and nothing was really coming up, so they closed the investigation. Again, this was way back when. We're going back in time to the initial point, and that is just to bring up also the characteristics that are sort of foreshadowing this, that ended up leading to Elizabeth being locked into the basement for 24 years. And I'll tell you how that ended, how she escaped. But first I wanted to, like I said, sort of go into why it was Elizabeth. Sometimes maybe imagine it was like the first child or the last child. To me, it would be like, oh, that's the baby of the family for the last child, or the first one would be like certain weird connection. All of this would be weird if considering what it led to, but I don't know exactly what it is that made him fixate on Elizabeth, but I wonder what it was about her. Was it the way she looked, particularly the way she acted? But then again, a lot of the children act very similar because they were scared when he would come home and were very quiet. They couldn't have friends over. So I'm just wondering what exactly made her different and made her the target of this sick plan, and especially more sick, all things considered, that it took him 6 years to build that awful dungeon, essentially. But okay, I'm almost at 10 minutes. So, moving on. We're going back to the back to the later years when there were already children and everything. So, I thought my glasses were on. I just hit myself in the eye. So, one of the children ended up getting sick. And initially, Joseph Fritzl did not want, the name is interesting to say, Fritzl, whatever. Anyway, so, initially Joseph was very hesitant, didn't really want to, but Elizabeth begged and begged and begged, and finally, why is my screen going dark? Okay, anyways, and finally, he decided he would take the daughter, who was 19 at the time, to the hospital. Now, when she got to the hospital, the doctors were confused. They thought maybe genetic disorder. They couldn't really tell exactly what was wrong with her because they needed to know medical history. And when they tried to find it, they found that she was not on record. It's as if she didn't exist. There was no record of her birth, of her existing. And mind you, this isn't like a child that showed up that nobody registered the birth. It was a 19-year-old, and they could find nothing on her existence. And so they knew nothing of her medical history, which was greatly impacting their ability to treat her. And at this time, Joseph was with her, and to be her grandfather. And, of course, came up with elaborate excuses, whatever. Sorry. And the medical staff, they noticed that he was acting kind of strange. But anyways, in the end, Elizabeth had to go to the hospital, and that is when it sort of all came out. She went to the hospital to see her daughter, give them information, and she seemed very scared. Initially was hesitant, but it was her daughter. And with all this, and with everything sort of piling up looking weird, the police were involved. And because this child didn't have a record, they thought that this child was abducted, and they were like, look, Elizabeth, you're gonna end up being convicted in this crime of the crime that was related to having this child with no record and could have been an abduction or whatever. And it took I believe around 5 hours. Double check that. It took it took a very long time. I believe it was around 5 hours, correct me if I'm wrong, for her to even begin explaining. And then the horrors came out, and they basically couldn't believe what they were hearing. But they couldn't believe it was so awful. Her testimony ended up being 11 hours long, and that testimony was then used in court. But she didn't attend the court. I wouldn't either. That'd be traumatizing to see your abductor and also to have to say all that again. It's hard. So they showed that to the jury or the people in court at that time. But when it came to Joseph, he just admitted everything. But he claimed that he had abducted her for her own protection, because he viewed that her lifestyle wasn't good and it was dangerous for her. He lied, trying to say she was a drug addict, and this wasn't true. And it was this there's no way to how do you defend yourself against this? That's the weakest thing. So he obviously ended up being convicted after they showed the heartbreaking 11 hours, I believe they showed the whole thing, 11 hours of footage of her testimony in court. Must have been a horrifying thing to listen to, but more horrifying to experience, honestly. And I don't think anyone would disagree with that, because it was such a horrible experience. And currently, Elizabeth and her children, they had to take a year in a specialized, I think it was a hospital, or to get more used to it and get back into society and all that. And one thing that really angers me is that Elizabeth Fritzl is up for release based on Austrian law in 2024 at the age of 89. And my personal opinion, I hope he dies, gets murdered, or dies literally before he exits the door. As in dies, initially dies beforehand. Call me a cruel person, I don't know. I just think that that kind of person should not be on this earth, because who knows what else he could do. And just by his series of, in his past, which there is more to, but I thought the victim story is much more important. Okay, we're approaching 15 minutes, so I'm thinking of making another video that's an analysis on this, so let me know what you guys think. Please do comment. I love the discussions. And I guess subscribe, please. I'm close to 10 subscribers, which I'm really excited about. So subscribe. I don't know what likes do, but go ahead. Share, I guess. All that good shit. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope I did a better job this time. And excuse the audio if it isn't that great. And we're still working on the camera part. So yeah, bye, good night, good day, whatever.